All right. Welcome everybody to Tokyo Comic Attack. I'm Oscar, also known, and you can find me on the internet as Big Fat Dog Comics. I am joined today, as always, by our spiritual leader Mulele, who you can find as Mulele Redux.
Mulele? What it is, though.
What it is, though. Indeed. We are also joined by the magnificent Chris, not Crisp. His name is Chris, aka Sketchfro. He's definitely not a potato chip. And he's also bringing us our topic of the day. We had a slight peek behind the curtain, but I'm not sure I understand it. But take it away, Chris. What are we talking about today?
My topic is about detail in media. I just finished playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. And for me, like, listening to the music, listening to different sound cues, looking at different smaller elements had me thinking about the same thing with comic books, where when you are reading a comic and you see, for example, certain background elements or characters in certain places where they're not supposed to be yet, or you didn't know that they're supposed to be there, or you question, why is this person here? These sort of detail elements. Huh?
Let me stop you there for a small second. Just for everyone who's about to turn off, this is a spoiler-free podcast because I haven't played it yet, mostly. So
is there a spoiler for this game?
I'm not spoiling anything. Don't worry.
This game is.
I'm just talking about it.
It's a remake of an old game, but they changed like a bunch of stuff. And I've heard that the ending is apparently very controversial or whatever.
We're not getting into that.
Yeah, no. That's just what I wanted to make clear for everyone who's not, because I've been dodging spoilers left and right. Doing great so far, but.
But so just when you're ready to talk about it, like you come to me. I'm ready to discuss every detail about that bad boy.
It might have to go on sale first, but that's a promise. With that little.
Huh?
Oh no! Just that full price it's heavy, man.
Is this available on the PS2?
Yeah,
it's PS4.
PS4.
Oh shit! I'm getting old.
Well, the old one was
PS1. PSX. 1997. Good year.
I don't think we had a PSX in Japan, did we?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. Anyway, I had a PS1, a PS2, and then a PS4 I got from my son. But anyway, so you were saying about detail?
So, yeah, in general, that led me to detail. Looking back through comics and going through certain things, certain panels, certain different comics that I've read, and just noticing things like character detail in the background, or like location details, or pivotal elements of like foreshadowing that's there. If the reader cares to pay attention to it. My question is, number one, how important is detail like this in comics that you make? Number two, when you see this in comic books, how much do you appreciate it? And how much do you think readers outside of here appreciate it?
That's interesting.
There are a couple of layers to that. One, the details of the comic, it should be competent first. I mean, there was a Jim Lee comic that I saw years and years ago. I don't remember the name of the comic, but it was a Batman thing where Batman was fighting some other dude in a parking lot. He'd parked his bat bike, started fighting the guy, and as they did a reverse shot of the action, like that one point in the fight, the action kind of reversed positions, and we saw behind Batman, and his bike was still there. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, the bike was lost for about 3 pages, and then suddenly you spin around and see that the bike is still there. Jim Lee did not forget it. He kept it there, but focused on the action. But the background was there, fully realized, even if it wasn't necessarily shown in that shot, which I really appreciated. It's something that I didn't see too often in American comics anyway. And so I on that level, just being functionally competent in how you render the page, just one thing. But the other thing is like putting foreshadowing and details in the background that kind of flesh out the world. I think that's something we've seen a lot of since like Star Wars or Blade Runner or stuff like that, because those details do make the world and people. I mean, when what?
Are we talking visually or just narratively? Narratively as well. Are we talking in general or?
Good point.
Chris?
That depends. I want to say both. Just because it makes for a good like mini discussion. Like don't limit yourself here.
I suppose yes. Do go on, Mulele.
Well, I'm just saying that whatever you put on the page should make sense. If you're forgetting details or you're letting things go because they're not important to you personally, then it shows it kind of shows a lack of care in my mind anyway.
I might want to jump in there if I may, because I'm thinking of an example that kind of plays into that.
Sure.
I am thinking of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I'm thinking in general. I've heard the term used that like a creator has their own language in a comic. Not sure I'm using it completely right, but that's how I kind of feel it anyway. And JoJo, everyone who's read it or has been in touch with it, it has its own language, its own style. It's like JoJo takes place in the JoJo universe. That's because the setting is supposed to be like the real world with some how do you call it, supernatural realism or something, but it's obviously not the real world because everything is just so strange and has this edge to it. It's just the creator's vision is very strong, which makes the book. I think the main appeal of it is not the strength of the story or the characters, but just that everything is just dripping in this style and it just oozes this world vision. But I was reading one of the arcs, and there's a scene where a guy gets this huge hole blown in his chest. But if you take the page, there is just like a small ribbon of meat that's holding like his chest together because the hole is just so big. And it's one of those one page spreads where it's you turn the page like the guy is doing an attack and you turn the page and wham, hole in chest. So it's this very dramatic moment because in JoJo everything is about being over the top and very dramatic, and often they use like these dramatic shots. But then as the story continues, like on the next page, he has like this small wound on his chest. And he made it out alive. And you could say like oh, it's detailing and he forgot about it because he has another scene where there's actually a part where a guy loses a finger in a battle, and near the end they're saying goodbye or whatever. And I was rereading it and I'm like, hey, let's see what happens to his finger. And his finger, like, they apparently forgot about it, and he got his finger back. So he forgot details like that. But you could say like, oh, that's sloppy detail, and he's not doing a good job. But I would argue to a certain extent that in the context of JoJo and like the language that the book uses, because you kind of teach the reader how to interpret your world. And I feel like JoJo teaches the reader not to care about detail, because it's all about over the top, and like in the world of JoJo, or in the world that the manga shows, style, and you get style points more than realism. Like if it looks really cool to have a guy's chest blow away completely because that looks cool, then they do it, and they kind of dial it back for the story afterwards. But it's not as much as a get away with or forget about thing. It's more that is that is the way things are represented in the JoJo world, because it's I guess what I'm trying to say is consistency is important here, because you know that it's not a one-time thing. Like he will consistently do these over-the-top things and then kind of dial them back if the story doesn't work with him. But he
So
stays consistent with it with his own style. Yeah,
basically, you're saying that he's consistently inconsistent.
that's exactly what I'm saying, I guess. Yeah,
And it kind of goes to the point of Bugs Bunny. If in that Bugs Bunny world, the hunter gets hit on the head with a mallet but survives, then that's fine. That's what happens in that world. Or like the rules of the Roadrunner. Roadrunner can do anything. Wile E. Coyote can do nothing. But I think that it is in fact really, really good. Brilliant animation, brilliant story writing, everything. But the world, once it's defined, should be adhered to, is what I'm saying. And if your thing is consistent inconsistency in the way that Roadrunner or Bugs Bunny work, or JoJo, then yeah, it's fine. I'm just saying.
I do feel.
Don't break your own rules, I guess, is basically it.
I do feel that in my example, like the chess thing was an obvious artistic choice, but the finger did feel like he just kind of forgot about it. Though, to kind of come back to Chris's original question, did it bother me? Not that much, I suppose. But I do obviously like it, as I suppose anyone does, when you have like a favorite story or something and you go back to it, and there's like a little something tucked away for, I don't want to say for the real fans or anything, but like it's there for you to find. It's kind of like, I would say like maybe the Dark Souls video game, if that, not to always bring it to other media, but there's like games in general. You kind of like you can play the main story you just played once, or you can do like side quests and get a little bit of extra story or context. And I think it's interesting if comics do the same thing, especially in manga, which there's a lot of pages and they're basically made to read through fast. So the first time you read it, you just go like flip, 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 flip. And if you really like it, you can go back, really give each panel, like really absorb each panel. And if then you start to find these little details, that's that adds to the experience of reading it a second time. And that's when I think adding details like that is like, of course, the base rule is like Mulele said, like don't make a good story first, of course. And because if you have a crappy story and instead of polishing your story, you get all obsessed about like putting little hints in the background of chapter 1, that's obviously not gonna, that's putting the cart in front of the horse, I feel. But when executed well, it can be a very rewarding experience to read. It's, I guess, what I want to say.
But in that same aspect, do you feel that a lot of people generally pick up on that kind of thing? Like when you're making your stories and you sit down and you're like, okay, there's this scene, there's a room, my normal characters or the main characters are here and they're the highlight and the focus. I've got some space to fill. Do you choose to put in little Easter eggs that will make people reading this excited and happy, or do you keep it plain? Like, how much of that do you consciously decide I want to put this in because it will serve the story well, it'll serve the reader well, and it's something noticeable enough that if people are looking out for it, it will reward them later on.
Well, first of all, it obviously I mostly write short stories, so it kind of depends on what you're writing. First of all, I think because I think especially the kind of stuff you write, Chris, where you have like a huge story over many chapters and you kind of know where it's going, then you can kind of do those things. But I feel like depending on maybe there's like certain kind of stories that works well for, and kinds of stories where it doesn't have the same impact. I feel like if your story is going to be very short and to the points to begin with, there's really no point in adding those kind of details, maybe. While on the other hand, if your story is going to be like hundreds of chapters, putting in a little reference all the way in chapter 1 is probably not worth putting like the effort in, because assumingly almost no one is going to go back all the way and be like, oh, you see what I mean?
Actually, yes and no. There's a there. Whenever you write a story, you're telling the reader to come along on this ride. You've got something you want to show them or tell them, and the reader has to trust you to a certain extent. And depending on how they vibe with the story, they'll dig a little deeper. But how deep will they actually dig? My case in point here is The Irishman. Have you seen The Irishman?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, then, major spoilers. I'm going to spoil the fuck out of it right here.
Oh. Give me a second. I still want to watch it.
First spoiler, Jimmy Hoffa was killed by Robert De Niro in that film. And second spoiler, and this is a big one, but I think you'll enjoy this watching it anyway. If you look at the logic flow of all the characters and see how it leads up to the killing of Jimmy Hoffa, there are some inconsistencies there, which lead to two possible endings. The first ending, and the most obvious one that everybody talks about, is that the Irishman killed his friend Jimmy Hoffa and went on with his life. And it cost him a lot emotionally. The second ending, or a possible ending, that not a lot of people have picked up on is that he didn't kill his friend. He faked it. And his friend lived the rest of his natural life elsewhere under an assumed name, and the Irishman never gave him up. Even when there was no one left to tell, he still never told. And you can take it either way, but you've got to really dig for that. And it's a 3.5 hour film. How hard do you want to dig through something like that? But I mean, if you care for it, the detail is really interesting. I watched it, and then I heard the concept, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's really interesting of an idea." I'm not sure I want to go back and check for those details, but still, we're talking about Martin Scorsese here, so there are those people who will dig for that because they trust him that much. And knowing that De Niro and Joe Pesci and Al Pacino, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot of other great actors, but they're all on their A game in this film. So yeah, people are looking at it really, really with rapt attention and finding this stuff. If I could ever command something like that in my own story, my God, I'd be surprised that anybody wants to look that hard. And I'll be amazed if I ever pull off something that interesting. But I mean, at that point, you're a master storyteller.
Oh boy. Yeah, that kind of thing is what is very conflicting when it comes to making stories. And I disagree with you on one small account, Oscar. I think that even with a short story, even with something that's 4 panels, something hitting in the background that can come back to haunt the person can definitely pay off if they're paying attention. I feel that that kind of thing, maybe more so than a long story, can pay off. And I think of Azumanga Daioh, for example, where in the beginning of the comic, you see the sharp-eyed orange cat in the background various times, just kind of staring at different people or
That's
staring at
that's
different things.
that's Dad, right? Isn't he just
Hmm?
called? Isn't he just called
Yeah,
Dad?
is Dad. That's right. That
Dad.
is Dad.
Those are.
But then eventually you see Dad, and Dad is freaking crazy. And you're like, oh my god, this thing is ridiculous. And then it's just like Mulele said. If you're willing to invest the time and you do go back and then you notice, Adosan is in the background here. Oh
But
my god, where else
man,
can I
I
find him?
feel like now you're really getting into the territory of Easter eggs, which I feel is a different because I think what I assumed we were talking about first was kind of like a setup and payoff kind of thing. While
Mhm.
I feel like an Easter egg is in a different category where it's kind of like a cute little winky moment or like a funny little extra. Whereas like I assume I kind of had to tune out because I really want to catch up on the Irishman. Um, but I'm assuming that was like story details and everything, not like a little nudge and a wink makes you smile, like something that adds a new layer to stuff.
No,
Okay.
major split in the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we should probably wrap it up soonish, but
Hmm.
just so much to talk about. Yeah, no, what I did want to say was oh, because you yeah, I believe you said something, Chris, like do you want to put it in there even if not everyone's going to get it? Um,
Right.
I just wanted to bring it back to video games because apparently that's what I'm doing this episode. Once more, where you have like um, a lot of I think what's it like the Witcher games or whatever they often have these moments where you take a choice and the story kind of branches, and
Hmm.
those studios are always faced with the thing where they're like, we know not everyone is going to play the game like 2 or 3 times, so you got to write it in a way that even if you play it just once, you have a complete experience,
Hmm.
and you can kind of maybe go back and get the other one. I feel like that's the same investment you got to do as a creator. Um, First and foremost, make sure your readers have a complete experience, and then if you have the time, if you have like the luxury lift to put in that little sidetrack, um, sure. But I personally consider it a luxury because I feel like um, getting the main story to be good should be the first focus. Um, and
Sure.
like Mulele said, if you're a master storyteller and you can weave those things into your story naturally,
Hmm.
then of course that's amazing, and that's something I think we all strive for. But I must say, I must before you brought this up, I wasn't really uh, thinking about it in my own works. I might this might have sparked a little thing where I just keeping it in the back of my head might help to get it in
I
there a
mean,
little more naturally.
I've got a little extra to add to this.
Hmm.
In some cases, the story is designed in a way that the full experience is for the reader to take something with them and consider after they've finished. Um, I can't remember the name of this. What's it called? Gone Baby Gone? Maybe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. The end of that, because I'm taking it to movies because that's what I'm doing today.
yeah.
Um,
There you go.
uh, the end of that film, I won't spoil it, but the protagonist has to make a hard choice. And what I felt after watching that was, would I have made the same decision? and did the protagonist make the right decision? And there's lots of contradiction in the end of the film to say that, you know, there's no 100% answer here. And so in that sense, the complete experience of the story is not necessarily on your page. You're only bringing an idea there, and there's all kinds of interpretation and reading and looking for things. And that's why I said there in the last episode, there's always two stories going on: the story of the artist and the story that the artist is trying to tell. And in that sense, the artist may discover something about the story later on as he's making it. And I think that those details.
It's a nice topic, by the way, Chris. I like it.
I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, because it's something that I realized I never really considered it up until now, very much.
And see, that's the thing, because when you're drawing comics, when you're making comics, at some point, when, especially for me, because again, as I've many times have told you guys, my weakness is for comics is backgrounds. I am horrible at drawing backgrounds, especially when it comes to more detailed housing or technology or things like this. But in those cases, I am the kind of person that likes to put extra little details in the background, where if a person is really reading something and they really see something, they will notice connection A to connection B, and it pays off for them later. Is it pivotal to the story? Is it important? I won't do that. I won't make the person scan the background and be like, find this person, and then you'll know that A and B is connected. No. But if they notice it, then they're kind of just rewarded with the idea of, oh, if I go back to this page, or if I go back to this comic, I can see this character or this thing. And yeah, for story and narrative, that works. But on the same account, here's an Easter egg that no one will ever pick up. I'm working on Duke and Tamara right now. In my first book, in the first story for Duke and Tamara, there's an Easter egg right in front of the people, right in front of anybody. And it's the little doll that the girl carries with her in the story. And that little doll is actually another character from one of my other stories, from one of my older stories. One person came to me to a convention and asked me about that character. And I felt really, really happy about it, because it was like, holy shit, you did your homework.
And you gaslighted them, you were like, no.
Don't crap on my moment. But it's kind of this, it's kind of just like a nice little nod. It's like looking at Star Wars Episode 4 Remake and noticing, oh my god, the Outlaw is in the background of Mos Eisley, and oh my god, I played that game when I was a kid, and it's that kind of a thing. It's just a mini little reward for people who are really looking out, but I kind of just wanted to know it from the other perspective, because we know it from the reader perspective. We read comics all the time, and we notice these little things, but we never hear how people react to these. As creators yourselves, I wanted to know, like, putting little details into the background, whether it's an Easter egg or whether it's important to your story, what is that impact on you?
But as a storyteller?
Yeah.
I'm trying to say something, and actually, to be honest, there are a couple of different patterns that I'm seeing here. One is the Easter egg. which has no bearing on the plot, but basically is there to give a nod to something that either you created or someone else created that has kind of pushed you in this direction for the story or whatever it is. So if I put, for example, Luke Skywalker in the back of one of my things, or Akira's bike, the bike from Akira in the back of one of my panels. Clearly these things inspired me, and I just want to put them there so people know.
Right.
And what's that?
A little like reference, a homage to the characters in some way.
Yeah, exactly. And another level would be having it affect the plot, where we suddenly realize that it's a shared universe, and I'm writing a Star Wars story or an Akira story, or I combine the two, whatever it is.
Deeper layer kind of story mastermind kind of angle?
Yeah. But it goes beyond just like an homage or a cameo. It actually starts to kind of take over the story, or it changes the story somehow. And then there's another one, and this one I've only kind of been playing with recently. Have either of you guys seen the movie Searching?
Never even heard of it, actually.
It's a really good movie starring John Cho. And basically, it's this guy who's searching for his daughter, and the entire thing is shot on, mobile devices and computer screens.
I might have heard of it. Yeah. It does ring a bell.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to spoil this, so anybody who doesn't want to know, just skip ahead. But for Oscar and Chris,
I'll listen this time.
Okay.
I'll take it on the chin.
So I won't tell you what happens with the main plot, but if you look at all the apps that are open on the screen, you'll start to notice a pattern emerge where it's actually telling a second story. And this second story is the story of an alien invasion. So this parent is just singularly focusing on finding his daughter who's gone missing. But in the background, there's this alien invasion that's happening.
Now you're kind of selling me on the movie, man.
nobody notices, but it's actually quite brilliant. It's worth watching twice for the two stories. And so for my own stories, I'm beginning to kind of toy with that, and I want to kind of get to that point where there is like, hey, there's an homage, and it comes up again, and this is now a story that I'm telling in the background of my main story. If the readers kind of pick out all of the different things that I'm dropping, they begin to realize what it is. And it's not like just an odd reference here. It's just constantly in the background. And for me, as a writer, being able to pull that off is very satisfying. I know I did it, and that's enough. If the readers find it, that's a bonus.
I feel like another category that, so if we put that one in, like, you have like little Easter egg, little story, be that maybe main plot or sub story. I feel like another way that little details can be used is world building. Which is I've watched some interesting videos on YouTube of someone kind of going off against this generation of American cartoons, because they claimed American cartoons these days are putting way too much effort and emphasis on world building, to the point where it's not about the characters anymore. It's about building the world so that the fans have a place, so that they have like a sandbox for them to project themselves in, kind of. But I feel that world building is mostly done through little details like this as well, that fans can really go back, pick apart everything, like connect the dots, and that it doesn't really serve a purpose as a narrative or an Easter egg, but it's just like it's fleshing out this world, perhaps unnecessarily sometimes. That's where I think that's what I was thinking of when I said like the story first, and let's maybe keep little details for if the story's clear. That's because I in the back of my mind I was thinking of the argument that these shows kind of almost forgot about their characters because they're so busy fleshing out the world and dropping little details, and at the end it's, I guess the idea is that your viewers are so busy playing connect the dot with all the stuff in the background that no one really cares about the main story anymore, because they just want to find all the little puzzle pieces, and or they just want to, I don't know. It's kind of like it's called lore sometimes as well. I'm not sure if that's a term that across media, but
No, that's right. Lore. I think is fine. I think lore happens very often with video games as well as some movie stories. But lore does work with comics as well. It's just a story element.
yeah. So how much lore do you want to put in your stories, or how much lore do you like to get for your
Well, actually, to that, look at Star Wars. What is that series about? I mean, we have 4, 5, and 6. It's about Luke Skywalker. We have 1, 2, and 3. It's about Darth Vader. We have 7, 8, 9. Suddenly, it's about the Emperor. And the more we build out the lore, the less focused it becomes on what was introduced to us as the main protagonist. Even though he appears in 6 of 9 films, even though the Skywalker saga, as it's called, isn't really about the Skywalkers. It's about Palpatine.
Yeah, exactly. I was the moment you mentioned Star Wars, I was thinking about the whole midichlorians thing.
They dropped that shit quick.
It's another part where like it doesn't serve any purpose other than just world building for the sake of world building, which I think is kind of a maybe a cardinal thing. What do you guys think?
If it doesn't forward the plot or really build into the characters directly, it's not really interesting in the story. I don't need it. It's superfluous material.
Yeah, so I think that's what I mostly want to watch out for if I would think about putting little details in my own world, is just like don't go crazy on the, because I feel like especially if you're an indie creator and you got this IP or this comic and you're in sole control, it can get very tempting and very easy to get lost in your own playbox kind of.
Oh, yeah.
And you're fleshing out the lore and everything, and you're having so much fun, and everyone else watching is like, please give us a story because we're getting so bored of having you over explain all the little background elements that
Well, I mean, if you've got a story that you're telling, you're asking a question to the reader, and the reader wants to get to the answer or to the ending in a satisfying way. But if you kind of meander through your own story, unless it's something that's appreciated by your reader, you're not going to get too positive of a reaction, I don't think. It becomes a time waster.
I think it's one of the first things I learned about writing in general, that when I was younger, I started out with this this almost impulse to explain everything. Like whenever there was like a system of magic, or like a question would always be why and how, and I'd always want to make sure everything is properly explored in the story. So if like a type of magic is introduced, like how does it work? Where is the end? Like almost to a physical level, which goes very Star Warsy, very fast, I suppose. And then I started noticing that in some of my favorite books, it would be like I'm thinking of Dorohedoro for some reason right now. There's mages in the world of Dorohedoro, and they have the power to have these doors. They make these doors between the mage world and the normal world, and that's it. They make these doors. It's never like the doors just appear and disappear, and it's all the doors do is their main function in the story is pretty much what it says on the tin. They let people move between the worlds. Um, so they never get into the like the nitty gritty, and it's never needed. And picking up stuff like that like taught me for my own stuff to be like explain only what is necessary and just run with the rest of it really.
Yeah, I can agree with that because again, I've dabbled with the devil. Is that what it's called? I forget the expression, but I've had that situation. I explained last time where, like explaining too much kind of just ruined things for me. And I think that when you give too much of an explanation or you're focused way too much on explaining detail over detail over detail, like it almost feels like you're ruining things not just for the reader but for yourself as well. I like having a situation where it's just like, why are these kids going on an adventure? Because they found a treasure map, all right? They found the treasure map. They want to go on an adventure. That's it. It doesn't have to be like, we have to save the neighborhood because this treasure map is the last thing that's... Who cares? Why not just, hey, oh my God, there's an explosion outside of my house across the river. Let's go see what happened. And I get sidetracked and I never find out what happens at the explosion. But man, do I have an amazing adventure. Man, that time, like with that old lady and helping her across the street, my God, beautiful. And the guy who gave me the sandwich, oh, the sandwich was amazing. It was so good. And then, oh, right, my main goal was this thing here, but the adventure itself was pretty darn cool. Now, again, this is a bad example because I'm pretty sure everyone here is like, well, what the hell happened to the explosion, right? What was over there? If you're drawing someone's attention to something as like a goal point, you do want to get them to that goal point eventually. I understand that. But good motivation and a good story and a good adventure is wonderful to have. But if I can tell you, like, oh, he draws maps very well. Why does he draw maps? Well, when he was a child, back in the day, like a man handed him a map and blah blah. If you don't need that explanation sometimes.
I think the explanation is there for the idea of an unreasonable conceit, and you're trying to explain something. But if your character drawn to the explosion, you set him up as a character who has a tendency to kind of wander, then it'll all be good. And if the explosion after a time is inconsequential to the main character, the reader will let it go. But I mean, that is a harder trick to pull. But I see what you mean.
That example again, sorry.
No, I guess that as a you got to make the consciousness decision to let go of the explosion as a writer. I think if you keep trying to write yourself back to the explosion and you keep getting lost yourself, then you're really frustrating the readers.
Well, if you as a writer are not lost, I think the readers will go with you on that. But that is a very, very difficult thing to do in storytelling, I think. But there's a bit of trust there, and you also have to hint at the beginning that, okay, there was an explosion. We're heading that direction, but we won't necessarily get there. But that doesn't matter because it's about this, not that.
An example I'm thinking of, which I would like to hear you guys' opinion of, the Lord of the Rings, mostly the book version. How do you guys feel? Because I was thinking of Lord of the Rings the other day for some reason, and how that, like, part of its strength is kind of the boring parts. The way that it's, because I feel Lord of the Rings is interesting in that fact because, if I remember correctly, it's kind of, the whole story was basically Tolkien made the Elfish script first, right?
I don't know.
I didn't look. I'm going by memory, but if I remember correctly, he made the script first because he was a linguist or something. Yeah. And he really liked this Elfish. Well, I guess at one point he decided it was Elfish script, and then he was like, "Oh, I wonder what elves are like," and then he came up with this whole background story to his script, and that background story is Lord of the Rings, the entire story. But in his story, he uses a lot of, especially in the books, there's a lot of almost unnecessary descriptions. But I feel like he's battling the fantasy genre almost. Well, it's become a thing in fantasy after there's pre Lord of the Rings and after Lord of the Rings. I feel, but just the amount of detail put into the I guess Lord of the Rings goes back to world building because the story itself, while it not necessarily being the most impressive part, just the world building of that one.
Well, for me, reading the book, the parallels between that and the time that he lived in, if I'm not mistaken, he's from Liverpool. Like when he left Liverpool, it was pre-industrial. But when he came back, the factories were in. And so when the hobbits go back to the Shire, and what's his name? Ringworm, Wormtongue, whatever his name was.
Grima Wormtongue.
Yeah, when he's there.
Oh, Saruman is there too, right?
Was he there? No, I don't think he was. I don't remember. But anyway, there was some wickedness that had happened to the Shire, which changed it forever. And that was the end of the book, which was different from the film. And in the film, he goes back, and although the Shire is the same, Frodo is different. And I thought that was kind of a weaker ending. The book was much better.
I feel like you're missing a small arc there, though, because I feel like the idea was they came back to the Shire, and because you had like Merry and Pippin, through their adventures, became these courageous soldiers that led these defenseless hobbits that gave them their fighting spirit. And Frodo, through his whole misery with the ring, he had like the moment of empathy where he was like, no hobbit will kill another hobbit, and he's like keeping things in check because having kind of seen True Darkness, he's the one where like, okay, military, whatever, I'll leave it to you guys, but he's kind of saving the soul of the Shire. So I feel like they're each using their abilities or their skills or you can see it's like a character progression arc thing where like they all use what they learned on their trip to save their hometown, kind of.
Sure, but I mean, when it comes to the book, my point still stands that they failed in that. Whatever they were trying to do to save the Shire, eventually the Shire was changed. And I think that was something that Tolkien himself saw, going off to World War I and then coming back to an industrialized Liverpool.
I suppose they did explicitly have a part in there about trees being chopped down, and they're like, that's going to take us 100 years to grow back or something, but if I remember correctly.
But my thinking here is that was quite interesting. The character growth stuff was okay, and they had that in the film, but I wasn't quite as interested in that. The idea that you can never go home again, even though that's what you're fighting for, was interesting to me.
Yeah. It does happen in those occasions where you will have stories that, I guess, fight the norm. Is that the right way to say it? Man, I feel like I'm more foreign to my own language than ever before. Thank you so much, quarantine.
Well, welcome to my world for the last 10 years by now. I feel like I lost the ability to have a mother tongue, and I traded it for
well, you speak 4
languages at once, but
and Chris, you speak 3. I speak only 2. I mean, I feel the most handicapped here, but
means you have most of your English left, basically.
No, I should say I speak half of 2 languages, and that makes 1.
Can I read you guys something real quick?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. So this is from one of my favorite book series. If you guys don't know, it's I do recommend this, and it's one of my better recommendations if when it comes to like when I'm feeling low on fantasy and I really want to like kind of get back into like an unusual fantasy world. This story creator does explain a bit about how they do magic, how they do the fantasy that is there, but it's in a different and unique way. It doesn't kind of like hit me over the head with it. At the right times, at the right moments, the main character is analytical enough that when he's getting into it, he starts talking about it. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. What I'm discussing is Patrick Rothfuss's series, Name of the Wind, Wise Man's Fear, and his third book, which still has not come out yet, and I'm very upset about. But anyways, I won't get on that one. The author wrote a third book that was kind of like filler. It was called The Slow Regards of Silent Things. If you read the main series of the book and you actually like what you're getting into, this is world building at its best because this focuses around one of the side characters that addresses the main character. But something that you guys were talking about made me think of the foreword from this book. And the foreword starts off with this first line: "You might not want to buy this book." This is the first line of this, and I'm like, okay, why?
Reverse psychology there.
No, but he makes it very clear. If you want to learn more about one of the pivotal characters, this story has a lot to offer. If you love words and mysteries and secrets, if you're curious about the locations where this character is involved with, and you want to know more about the hidden things in the world, this book might be for you. Now, the foreword is much, much bigger, but that's like a generalization of it. It's just 2 pages. But when I picked up this book, I read the foreword first, and I still bought the book because I knew I'm already into the story. I'm invested. I'm going to get into it. But yeah, like sometimes you're right. World building, other sorts of elements when it comes to what you're making, what you're drafting, is kind of like that. It's not going to be for everybody, but as you as the author, if you're making it and you're content with it and you like what you're doing, I'm with you on that one. I do the same thing. I get it. But I guess what you're saying in general is it has to be feasible. It has to be understandable. It has to work with the story. There has to be, if you're gonna do it, there has to be a good payoff. Or if it's just something that's a nudge or a wink to something, then leave it as that and don't expect much from it if that's what you're putting into it.
You mean don't have it become like an inside joke, or?
It can always become an inside joke. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you shouldn't. From Oscar, from your point, I shouldn't start my story guns blazing, full energy, running from the starting gates, doing boom, 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 inside story and detail. It's something that I should work to when I have the ability to do it, and when it feels right, not just for the story, but for me creating it.
Yeah, I suppose if Lord of the Rings started out with like a detailed family tree or whatever, a lot of less people would have read
it. Welcome to the Lord of the Rings. Before we begin, I'm going to describe the details of the Elven language.
What am I saying? That is actually a book, and that's the Silmarillion, and I haven't finished it because my God.
Well, I mean, for fuck's sake, Lord of the Rings, part of that shit is written in Elvish, and I got to use the dictionary in the back to kind of translate that shit as I go. No, fuck that. I skipped that shit because I don't want to be stuck in another Tom Bombadil kind of scenario. Fuck that character too. And I know, Oscar, you like that character because he represents the the freedom and the pure joy of the time and that area. But-
When did I ever take up arms for old Tom Bombadil?
About 3 years ago, we talked about it. But anyway,
Oh, did I? Damn.
yeah, I think you mentioned something like that. Maybe not that you were like a stand for Tom Bombadil, but I said I hated the character, and you're like, yeah, he's not that bad.
I will go on camera that I might have had a slight horny crush on his river nymph girlfriend or whatever.
Mm.
He has like a whole song about how she's really hot, and as a teenager I was like, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
That's the only explanation I can think of.
Yeah, I read it as an adult with a 1-year-old child, so a little bit different. But anyway, my point is, I forgot my point. Fuck it. I'm lost.
Sorry.
Yeah, never mind. I
River
just couldn't
nymphs
bring myself back.
have clouded your memory.
A little side tangent, but Chris mentioning fantasy books made me think of a recommendation of mine, which I can kind of tie back into our main topic, actually.
What was that?
I had to look it up, but it's called The Bloodsounders Arc by Jeff Saylor. Well, it's spelled Salyards. Salyards? Whatever.
Salyer?
Salyards? But it's like
Sorry for getting it wrong.
yeah, it's like a realistic fantasy kind of just 3 books and it's done. But it's really good. I really recommend it. But what it does is, and this is giving it away a little, but sometimes you gotta tease a little leg to what it does is the first book is straight up soldier tale, like just like grim, grimy soldiers in non-existing fantasy lands, and they do a little, because we were talking about how or I was making big claims about how there's like world building and story. He does both very smartly, because in the first book they give a little world building about all these magical concepts and like stuff going on in the backgrounds, but the story just kind of, it's not that interested in it. It's just it's there. It adds flavor, and that's it. But as the books go on, that they make it, it becomes the main point of the series. It's like the climax where it all builds towards. But it's amazing if you're reading the third book and they have this big climax. If you think back on the first book, how it was like tucked away in the background, waiting its turn. It was so subtly done that it's very interesting how it builds up. But I'm not sure if it, I guess it qualifies as a detail, but yeah, no, because in the first book it could have gone on being like just soldiers fighting and the magical thing get left by the side, but it's wonderfully built up. Like the third book is all about it, and the second book they kind of go more towards it. But I think it's a perfect example of planting an idea in the background and then turning it around and pushing that in your main story. It's very much recommended. Bloodsounders Arc, first book, Scourge of the Betrayer. And it's a lot of split skulls, fuck horse kind of book, if I can put it that bluntly. So consider that a word of warning. But yes.
Cool. I have the next time I go shopping on the book depository looking for my third book, I'll have to ask you again about that so I can see if I can get a copy.
If you have any form of Kindle, I might be able.
How long have you known me? Look, I am a physical copy person. All right, I've been Like,
Man.
I've been angry for most of this month because I didn't get my copy of Final Fantasy VII until it finally came here, physical copy, and I had 10 people yelling at me, just get it digitally, just get it digitally. And I told all of them that they could literally stuff a goat down their throat because I don't care. I want that physical copy. I need it. It's me.
I was like you on the books, but Kindle, it won me over, man.
I realize, but I'm still a total physical copy. Like, I still to this day like get into arguments with Archie Comics, IDW, and a few other ones where it's just like, hey guys, where's my physical copy?
They don't do physicals anymore?
No, they do, but they don't send out a lot of their physical copies overseas and other places. So it's like, you need international delivery. And I keep telling them, like, I want international delivery. I want the physical copies. Like, why don't I just go digital? I was like, nope. Nope. Sorry. This is not my thing. Uncle Chris totally needs his physical copy. So, bye-bye.
All right. So we're jumping into recommends.
I guess we kind of already did, but I got some other stuff lined up. But Chris, how about you? Got anything you wanna?
I'm gonna do 2 quickies. First quickie is Mind Duck Japan is a podcast about the odd, crazy, unique things that you might find or see in Japan. It's a fun little podcast group. The guy is a constant game jams developer. He does programming for video games, but very often he does like game jams with groups of friends to create video games. He also invited me on one episode of his podcast to talk about weird mascots. So,
Nice.
just shameless plug. Episode 11 of the Mind Duck Japan podcast, you will hear me. But it's very interesting. I do like the show, so I want to plug that. What was my other recommendation? It was music, or was it a comic book? No, I'll stick with that for right now. That's my one plug. I'll come back to me later on the other one. I got to figure out my other one. Sorry.
All right.
Mulele, you got anything?
Actually, from Oscar's recommendation last week, Kayfabe on YouTube. Yeah, it is an incredibly rich and engaging video series, I guess, a video channel. And basically, Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg break down comics, indies, majors, European comics, Japanese comics. It doesn't matter. They're just in for comics. They're really knowledgeable. They research a lot before they present. They have a lot to say. They have an eye for detail in a lot of things like color, and they really teach me something about comics. Better than that, they made me appreciate comics again. And I've been ordering books like a motherfucker, trying to keep up with them. Some of them are a little bit too expensive. I'm not about to jump in for a 1980 Jack Kirby version of 2001. But man, it was good to watch that video, and I can't recommend them enough, because at this point, I'm beginning to look at the craft beyond just the Marvel story that was put in front of me. I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. And so rather than saying, it's Marvel, it sucks, fuck it, I'm out, or I'm not into comics, I've kind of rediscovered that I like looking at good comics, and this is good comicking on many levels from many generations. And it's just a treasure of a channel, and so I can't recommend it enough. Absolutely, go check out Kayfabe.
Very nice.
It is a channel that really makes you want to buy stuff now.
Yeah. I think I've spent about $150 now on just various little whatevers. Actually, I should say a little bit of that was pre-kayfabe. From them, from their recommends directly, I think I've bought about half that. So, yeah. But I'm sure I'm going to go broke just trying to keep up with them. Anyway, Oscar?
Gotta be careful with that. Nice.
Well, nothing that epic on the recommendation corner on my side this week, but I guess the general it's a bunch of YouTube stuff again. The general tome or team I would put it under is like stuff I've heard about, but I don't really get it. Like stuff like to me, Sonic the Hedgehog, wrestling.
What?
SpongeBob.
I can explain that to you, man. Like that's easy for me.
Yeah, no, I was a complete outsider to the Sonic franchise, aside from playing one of the games on one of the Sega handhelds. But I mean, the concept is just that there's this thing, the internet has the hots for it. They can't shut up about it, and you encounter it through, how do you say that? Through secondary. You never see the show, but you constantly get like little bits of it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's wrestling as well. And so there's a guy called Super Eyepatch Wolf who makes pretty good quality videos in general, but he has a few where he kind of takes a thing and really does like a deep dive, and this is what it's all about. And he has the ones I would recommend would be on wrestling. He has The Undertaker long-term storytelling in wrestling, which is basically a video for people who don't know anything about wrestling like me, or like you heard a few names and you're like, what is it all about? And he kind of takes you from zero to why people love wrestling. And he has another one on the one I watched recently that I was thinking about is the bizarre modern reality of Sonic the Hedgehog, where he kind of like walks you through the rise and fall of Sonic and like why all the weird Sonic memes and Sonic OC's thing are a thing, and how that all ties in. And to tie it up, another like a bit of, honestly, not quite as amazing, because I feel like Super Eyepatch Wolf, most of the stuff he makes, I watch and enjoy. This other guy, I'm not sure about his other stuff, but there's this one video, Emperor Lemon or Emp Lemon, Why There Will Never Be Another SpongeBob, where he kind of, I mean, this one is more one of the you can mostly figure it out by yourself, I guess, but I still found it interesting how he kind of dissects SpongeBob and why it has left such a mark on, because it's been around for, I don't know, he mentions in the video, but like a very long time. And he kind of dissects the staying power of the series and why it resonates with people. And I always find that kind of stuff interesting to watch. So those would be my recommendations if you kind of want to know a little more about stuff. Or you can always just slip into Chris's DMs and ask him what Sonic is about.
I am answering all questions about Sonic the Hedgehog and the end of Final Fantasy VII this week.
That's a good one. Another little one in the music department. I wanted to bring this one up because of what Mulele always says, how there's the story of the artist and the shit. What's the quote again? Mulele, help me out here.
Oh, there are always two stories in every story: the story of the artist and the story he's trying to tell.
Yeah. So there's this artist who's apparently famous, Tones and I don't know if you heard about her.
I'm sorry, who?
Tones and I. She has songs like Dance Monkey and Bad Child, I believe.
Mm.
Anyway, I found a post on a forum of someone saying, "Oh shit! Look, it's Stones and I busking in the subway somewhere." Apparently,
Mm.
busking is an amazing word for when you kind of street perform. Um,
Mm.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
again, she's apparently got quite a fan base now, so I gotta weigh words here a little. But she is a not unimpressive, like no stardom whatsoever. I think she has a baseball cap that she's kind of made her iconic little thing, and
Mm.
I looked up like her music because the song is like just a crappy little hand filmed video of her, but the song was really good. And I looked up the song which was Dance Monkey, I believe, and personally I find it an amazing song. But she apparently went from being that just this woman in the subway with like she has like a little keyboard and a little almost I don't know if it's handwritten, but it might as well be handwritten sign taped to her keyboard kind of setup, and she kind of exploded from that all the way to the super fame. Um, and you have these videos of her music where she's playing to these huge crowds, but she still has this uh, kind of streetwear. Like it's more expensive now, but she's still rocking the sweatpants look. And um, excuse me, as much as I love her music, it kind of made me think of Mulele because the appeal the appeal to me is double in that I like the music, but I find the story to be really appealing as well. How you have this just trying to make it work on the subway from international superstar, which I guess is an angle that a lot of artists push in music.
Mm.
Um, and like some of her songs have like almost this. It makes me think of some of the stuff Eminem used to have, where they go on about how crappy their childhood was and everything.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
it's kind of that kind of vibe, but the I don't know how to describe the music. It's kind of what's the name of that Rolling in the Deep woman again?
Adele?
Yes, it's kind of Adele-ish. I'm not really good with describing music or genres and everything, but it's that kind of it's music you can dance to if that helps out. But I don't know. I would check that out. But I thought it was interesting just because it's an example of what you said, Mulele, but like from the music world where because I was drawn into her story more than her music at first. Uh,
Mm.
the idea of watching
Interesting.
someone make the journey that of course that's very marketed these days, I know, but the the little hand camera street performance made it feel very authentic. Um, which is something I've been thinking about myself actually about like how um, as a creator you kind of have your own brand and you're kind of trying to be authentic, I suppose, because that's become a big part in our digital society where it's easy to get removed from things, and if as a creator you kind of want to first and foremost let people know that you're flesh and blood just like they are, kind of a
Mm.
Mm.
uh, yeah, made
That's
me made me
true.
think about said a lot of stuff like that, I suppose. But that's my recommendations for the week. Um,
Actually,
I
I've
got
got
one
one.
more.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
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 go
okay.
you
ahead.
go. You
No,
go.
no, no. Mine is more of a subject change. So go ahead. You first.
Uh, mine's is gonna lead into an idea like this. My other recommendation is something that I watched recently, which was because of, again, sorry, Final Fantasy VII. I love the music, and I've been listening to the music while I was drawing. I hate to say this, in the last week, I storyboarded and drew out 20-something pages, and I'm now inking my third chapter because I've just been listening to the Final Fantasy music. I'm just like, fuck it, I don't need to do anything else today. So, yeah, I got a lot of work done this week. I'm very happy about that.
Nice.
But there's an interview from Polygon about how Nobuo Uematsu composed one of the songs called One Wing Angel, and he describes it as a process called puzzling. And this is something that I want to take into making stories, because when I make a story, or when I do comic stories, I also do certain elements similar to how he made this song. So I encourage you guys to kind of listen to this. It's only 4 minutes, but think of it when it comes to stories, because next time I have the ability to control the topic, this is what I'm going to ask you about as well, is story processing in different type of methods and ideas, and kind of flowing with that. But it's really good. I like how he talks about it, and I love his music. So yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Okay. I've got one thing that really chaps.
Oh no.
Yeah. So last night I was on Netflix and I was checking out one of their new shows called Midnight Gospel.
Oh no.
Do you know the show?
I know. Yes, I have not watched it yet, but I think I know what you're going to be talking about. Go ahead.
Fuck this show. That's all I gotta say. Fuck this show. This show is garbage. Mm-hmm. I watched the first 10 minutes of the first episode, and I kept kind of like trying to get to the story, but I think the story is that there is no story. It's just this setup with incessant talking the entire time through. Man, fuck this story. Fuck this show. I can't watch it anymore.
Do you think they're trying to be like an Adventure Time or something like that, or do you feel like it's
a cartoon,
just like?
Yeah, it's cartoon.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did feel a little Adventure Timey, but Adventure Time was what, like 5-10 minutes at a time?
Yeah.
This is 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And fuck me, that first story, I was out. And by the time they got to the end, I was just no.
What's it called? What's it called again?
Midnight Gospel.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
It's just this year, right?
What's that?
This year it came out, so it's very new.
This week.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, my recommend to stay away. Midnight Gospel.
When you said like this chaps, and then you mentioned searching on Netflix, I thought that was it, because searching on Netflix, my God.
Yeah, I don't search too much. I sail the high seas and.
But
all right, Captain.
Yar. Chris.
Yo.
Why are you, or why are you not recommending the Final Fantasy remake?
I do recommend it.
Okay.
Of course I recommend it. I love it. I'm telling people that if they have... Shoot, I'm already on the waiting list for the soundtrack. I'm going to try to buy the 8-disc full orchestrated soundtrack when it comes out in a few months, because that thing is so damn good. No, I'm a big fan for it, so that's... No, sorry.
Yeah, why don't you just buy it digitally?
I was going to make the same joke, damn.
It's not available digitally. Meh. You jokers making me cry.
Well, I do understand that as much as I'm not completely into the digital era, but as much as I've adapted to the digital era, when you say Final Fantasy soundtrack, there's something about that I can understand that you just have to have it on physical version.
God, yeah, so good.
Actually, at this point,
for anyone who doesn't know, by the way, is the very bombastic the main villain team and it's amazing.
At this point, I've got nothing that I can play physical media on.
Really?
Well, look, my Mac has no CD drive. I guess I could play it on my Blu-ray player, but I haven't really seen if it's operational in about 6 months because I watch Netflix.
I actually have the same problem.
I've got a couple of DVDs, but
No. If you both have PlayStations, you're fine because you can play it on there. You have a media player.
I have a PS4, and it didn't want to do audio CDs.
My son tells me that the CD player or the media player is broken, and so I got to get all my games digitally.
I'm upset about that.
Hey, if you've got a PS4 you're willing to give me that's operational, I'll gladly take it off your hands.
Yeah, of course you would. Of course you would.
Hey, my son gifted me this one. I'm not going to buy that shit myself.
Most of my stuff is physical, actually. Yeah. Games anyway.
Yeah, most of my stuff is physical.
You can't resell them if you're digital. Games are expensive.
Well, shall we wrap it up?
Yes.
Yep.
One more round of plugs, I'd say. Mulele, why don't you start it off? Where can we find you? Where can we throw money at you?
I'm Mulele Redux everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. Patreon, I push the most because it pays. But the thing is, a lot of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it in the process of writing and all of this, I'm trying to put everything, or document everything, and put it on the Patreon. I'm trying to put it out in a way that I'm not spoiling my own story. So you'll see pieces kind of go up. And when I have like a certain chunk, then I'll drop that part of the script and put it all together so you can kind of read it smoothly. But if you want to see how I work and what I'm working on right now, patreon.com/Mulele Redux. Chris?
You know me as Sketchfro online on Instagram, on Patreon, Gumroad, and many other locations. I'm currently working on Chapter 3 of Duke and Tamara, which Patreons will be getting Chapter 2 soon. Once I go through all the edits. But yeah, I am the same way. Just Google @Sketchfro. That is sketch like a pencil, fro like an afro that I do not have, and you can find me anywhere. Oscar.
I am known as the mighty Big Fat Dog Comics. Find me on Instagram. Find me on Gumroad. That's Big Fat Dog Comics on both of those. Haven't quite bothered with the Patreon yet, but go on Instagram, bug me about it. Tell me you want me to give me your money. If you don't, on Gumroad though, you can get some of my previous comics from $0 or whatever you want to give me. I'm currently bravely trying to keep a once a day upload schedule on Instagram for little 4-panel gag strips about a big fat dog, which I will try to keep up for a while, but find me on Instagram mostly. I think that's us for this week.
Okay.
You have been Tokyo Comic Attack. I still can't say it with a straight face.
You just
you
been
have
attacked.
been Tokyo Comic Attacked. You have been attacked. See you next week.